We tend to see a lot of things in our medical charts. And a lot of the medical charts will give us this reading of BMI, body mass index, that classification of underweight, normal weight, overweight, obese, etc. But have you ever thought for a second, what's wrong with using the body mass index? Why do we use it? Does it tell us anything useful? Well, let's talk about that.
Warning. The following presentation contains information that might contradict what you have previously heard, or believed to be true, about how the human body works, and contains material that is not suitable for closed-minded individuals. Enjoy!
And so when we start looking at this body mass index issue, what we're really talking about is body weight, body composition, and other measures that are relatively easy to take. So why do we use it? Well, it's relatively easy to take. It's quick, it's inexpensive. It's an inexpensive analysis that we can do about the height, the weight, and the body composition in terms of fat mass versus fat-free mass for an individual. What do we need in order to take it? Scales, body mass analyzers, body composition analyzers, a tape measure. What does it actually tell us? What does body mass index and what does the body composition analysis actually tell us? It tells us our body weight, how much mass do I actually have? It tells us the relationship between fat mass and fat-free mass. And it's going to give us a relationship between our height and our weight, the BMI. This is what a lot of health professionals and fitness experts have liked to focus on when we start looking at relative health index, along with other measures of body composition and body weight. The other thing we look at is what's referred to as the waist to hip ratio, which is the relationship between the girth of the abdomen that the people have. This is an indication of how much visceral fat somebody might have relative to subcutaneous fat. That's the fat underneath the skin versus the fat that's around the organs. Visceral fat being the fat around the organs, subcutaneous fat being the fat that is found around or underneath the skin. So let's talk about body mass index or a height to weight ratio. And what are we doing with height to weight ratio? Well, height to weight ratio is useful when we start looking at infants and young children in terms of their growth development. It becomes a little bit less accurate of a measurement when we start looking at post-adolescence in terms of height and weight. When we start looking at in terms of juveniles, start looking at in terms of children, what we look at in terms of classifications of body mass index or height to weight ratio is an indication of percentiles within the normal population, where we want to be between the 5th and the 85th percentile, where 50th percentile is normal. That is the midway point of the population. If I'm above the 85th percentile, I start to run risks for long-term health issues. If I'm underneath that 50th percentile, if I start creeping towards the 5th percentile, I'm at severe risk for growth development issues. The reason why height to weight ratio and BMI is more advantageous in younger individuals than in post-adolescent individuals is because excess weight in adolescents and excess weight in juveniles, in children and teenagers, is going to be predominantly within fat mass as opposed to fat-free mass, which is where we start looking at, okay, what does body mass index tell me? Body mass index is a calculation of height to weight, and it's a ratio of height to weight in which we're going to look at classifications of underweight, normal weight, overweight, pre-obese, obese, extreme obese, or morbid obese based off of WHO, World Health Organization classifications as relates to what is the index number. And so when we start looking at this in terms of this calculation that we happen to have, we end up having this index table. And what the index table is simply telling me is what is the relationship between my body weight and my body height. It doesn't tell me anything else but that. It was originally developed as a way to establish life insurance policies and risks for life insurance policies back in the late 1800s, early 1900s, Once again, when people who had high body mass had high fat mass. A lot of the health issues that we see in terms of this BMI, in terms of what does the BMI tell me about fitness and about my overall health, is that it's providing me an estimated relative risk for chronic disease. The problem is the population that we are assigning this relative risk for chronic disease to, as relates to BMI, because we're not studying the entire population, we're studying the diseased population, the population that has chronic health issues due to overfatness, where they fall within the fitness and fatness continuum. We're not looking at it in terms of the overall population, which is why BMI is not a very reliable measurement to use as it relates to health. It's simply telling me what is the relationship of surface area to mass. What is the relationship between my height and my weight? Which takes us to the problem. The big problem with BMI is that it's not a very good predictor of mortality or a very good predictor of disease risk, even though we like to think about it as disease risks. There are other measurements that we can use that have higher likelihoods of associations and higher likelihoods of linkage to chronic diseases than BMI. This is where we start having to look at what are the contributing factors to health? What is the relationship between fitness and fatness? And the fact we have to remember is that we have this intricate balance between level of activity and fat signaling as relates to what is my increasing and decreasing relative risk for disease and the contributing factors between fitness and fatness that's going to develop where do I lie within that continuum of fitness and fatness towards my overall health, which has nothing to do with my actual body composition. And that's because the whole entire idea about health and overall health as it relates to body morphology is an excessively complex problem. It's a complex problem that we want to assign very simple solutions to, that we cannot assign simple solutions to. This is where we have to look at how might that idea about simple solution impact the way in which I present my ideals about health and about fitness as it relates to what somebody looks like, which takes us into other problems. And it's not just with BMI that we have these other problems. These other problems are also going to lie within the other measures that we might have, such as waist to hip ratio or body composition analysis. Because either way we look at this, whether we look at it in terms of just simple mass, your body weight, if we look at it in terms of body mass index, BMI, if we look at it in terms of waist to hip ratio, or in terms of body composition analysis, body fat versus fat-free mass, the whole idea here is that we tend to have a social issue coming into play. And that's because we raise the risk for body image issues. We raise the risk for weight biases. We raise the risk for issues as it relates to what is body image and what do we think of as being healthy versus what do we sociologically and socially accept as being beautiful. And this also goes into all of the various scams that we might be presented and misinformation and disinformation that we might be presented as to what is the best body image that I might be able to project, something we've talked about quite a lot. But the other thing that comes into play in terms of this idea about body mass index, BMI, as well as the other measures of body composition, is that it changes my internalization and my level of self-esteem as to what my body is and how I feel about my body simply based off of what is the projected acceptance of my body image relative to my BMI. That is, what is my classification? Am I normal weight? Am I overweight? Am I underweight? Am I obese? Am I morbidly obese? Am I severely underweight? And how do I change the way in which I talk about health and the way in which I talk about diet and the way in which I talk about nutrition, the way in which I talk about exercise around individuals based on how I perceive their body image strictly off of what the BMI is telling me or what I perceive their body composition to be. It's also going to raise the risk for healthcare issues coming into play based off of preconceived notions and body image and weight bias being projected by the healthcare professionals. We also have to worry about the way in which we present body image and weight biases in terms of media and how that media might impact the way in which I perceive myself and the way in which I feel about myself based off of my body image or how people think about my body image, which leads to issues of weight stigma, which leads to issues of portrayal of body image, which leads to issues of eating disorders and body dysmorphic disorders because we cannot differentiate between reality and fiction based off of what's being presented to us. Well, thanks for watching. There's a whole bunch more on this topic on the podcast, and I'll put links in the description. Please make sure you're sharing. Please make sure you're subscribed, giving us that big thumbs up, giving that 5-star rating, letting us know that we're doing a good job with all the stuff that we are putting out there. Make sure you are subscribed to all the various platforms that we're publishing on. Here are with YouTube, as well as on the podcast, the written stuff in Substack, as well as the quick takes on Instagram and on Threads.